Brewster here, another episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Lynyrd Skynyrd, and I've had a lot of requests to feature more Southern rock and some of Lynyrd Skynyrd's music, and these guys are essential. And Skynyrd formed in Jacksonville, Florida in 1964, and had some early, name and member changes before finally deciding on Lynyrd Skynyrd in 1969. And they went on to become one of the most popular Southern rock bands of all time, and they're also one of the most popular rock bands of all time. So like I just mentioned, Lynyrd Skynyrd is one of the most popular rock bands of all time. Their name and legacy is up there with other, popular groups like the Stones or Led Zeppelin. And definitely Lynyrd Skynyrd is very popular and has been, since they were a new band. And back in the 70s, there was a kind of a cast of characters in the guitar department. Gary Rosington has been like the mainstay, original member. He's been in Skynyrd the whole time. But then you had other players like Steve Gaines and Ed King, Alan Collins, and some of these players. So here's an image with some of those legendary Skynyrd guitarists. When I did the research for this episode, I really wanted to dive into something that I'd never really researched or read about, and that was the origin of Lynyrd Skynyrd's name. And I knew that they named their band after their old high school gym coach, but I never really dove in. I wanted to see what he looked like, and I wanted to read as much as I could find. So here's an image of Lynyrd Skynyrd, which was the gym coach that Lynyrd Skynyrd basically, named their band after. The music in this episode came from 3 of Lynyrd Skynyrd's most popular albums. The first album, Second Helping, and Street Survivors. And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. I'm not worried about hits or Freebird or Sweet Home Alabama or any of that stuff, because honestly, 3 Steps and Sweet Home Alabama and Freebird and all those classic Skynyrd tunes have been taught and transcribed since I was in high school. So that's very well documented and transcribed. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper and pull out some of those hidden gems from Skynyrd. So here we go. The opening, that's Poison Whiskey from the first Lynyrd Skynyrd album, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd, and it's the swampy blues rock riff. Really cool, something like this. Starts with this, really aggressive G7 riff, and I'm basically combining, there's 3 guitarists in Skynyrd technically, so I'm combining 2 of those parts together to create, a 1 guitar part that sounds like Poison Whiskey. So the first guitar is this, and then you hear that, and that's actually another guitar, but I added that to it. Going to do that, kind of partial C to that hammer-on right there from B flat to B. Like that. And then right there when you get back to that hammer-on, you're going to trill. Skynyrd actually made, history with these stacked power chords. So there's an E flat over B flat, and then a D over A. And you got this climbing chromatic riff. And then you're going to basically spell out this E flat 7, and then move down a half step to D7 and do it again. And then go back to that G riff. Right there you want to do that G, F, G, and then end on a D7 sharp 9. The Hendrix chord. So one more time all the way through this riff. next is Ain't No Good Life from the Street Survivors album, and this has more of that Hendrix chord action with an F sharp 7 sharp 9, and it's something like this. Starting with this kind of stacked F sharp 7 sharp 9 right there. So start with this higher F sharp, and I've seen this written a couple different ways. There actually might be, you know, two of the guitarists in Skynyrd separating this, but I found a way to do it all with just one guitar right here, because I think the chord might actually be hitting up here. But you can play that same Hendrix chord, you know, F sharp 7 sharp 9 right there. Same chord, but we can fret it like this. And then you hear that octave move down to the lower F sharp, so that's why I put that chord right there. And then you hear it climb up into an A. And right there, you're doing that kind of typical like A boogie blues. And I like that slide into F sharp back to E and then grab that C sharp. Like that. And then E. And right there, after you do the E, you're going to climb up into C sharp. Right? And right there, you're going to do that kind of typical, you know, it's a C sharp 5. But you're going to basically target that F right there. And then right there, it basically ends with this F sharp augmented right there. You know, which is really unusual, that little curveball at the end. So one more time with all this. Gives it this really kind of old school rock and roll kind of flavor. Up next is You Got That Right from the Street Survivors album, and there's a really interesting kind of chord thing happening here, like this. Something like that. And we're basically starting with this F, like a little partial F chord, and then it's a B flat 6, and then it's E flat right there. Kind of a partial, you know, E flat over G, I guess. You can think of it that way. So it's 3 chords, but it's really interesting the way that kind of 70s inversion sneaking in after that B flat 6. Like that. And you also hear that high E string in there too, you know, with that G note. And the second time when you go back down, you're going to hammer on. And then back to that B flat 6, and then back to that F. And you do it again. And then right there, it's basically a D flat over A flat, and then an E flat over B flat. And then you want to end on F over C. And the verse starts right there. Okay, next up is Workin for MCA from the Second Helping album, and this is a really tricky, kind of deceptive riff, and I've noticed some transcriptions online that were really wrong, but something like this. shows you the power of a single note, because there's a lot of like single notes mixed in with these little parts of, you know, power chords. So we're starting here, and then you're going to grab, you know, it's a B power chord, and you're going to stretch up and grab this D note while you're holding that E on the D string, and then move that D back to C sharp. Like that. And then a single B right there. And then, so after that single B, go to an A power chord right there, just a 2-note A power chord. Go back to that B note, and then do an E power chord, and then grab an F sharp. So that first half of the riff, kind of weird, kind of quirky, definitely a finger twister, even though you're really just using one finger for the most part. And start it again. And the second time you're going to do that A power chord, then you're going to grab, you know, the second fret there on the A and the B and hammer on to a C sharp. And then do that E power chord to F sharp again. So a really weird, quirky riff, but you know, once you really start to play it, you know, the right way, you notice it has like this groove to it and a flow, which is really cool. Very distinct sound. So is this one of those times when Skynyrd was using PV amps? Because it noticeably sounds very different than other Skynyrd songs. Okay, next up is swamp music from the second Helping album, and as the name suggests, it's the swampy blues rock idea with some country kind of mixed in, and we're hybrid picking. It's kind of twangy. It's really cool, like this. So we're basically flirting with E7, and then you hear it move through a blues in E, E to A, and eventually B7. But with this first part, we're doing like a hammer on right there, open A, B to C sharp, and then you hear this. So it's the low E open, and then you're doing this partial E, and you're hammering on that open G to G sharp, and then you want to move up to where you've got A and C sharp right there. And then you're going to move up in this partial, you know, E7, this D note and that B note. So we're really just flirting with E7. So that move's pretty common. It's turned up in other episodes of Chordplay, but we're doing this. And then you want to start it again. And the second time there, you're just moving back and forth between that little partial E major and that transition kind of chord. To A. It's kind of a variation of the E. There's a little partial A, this transition there with F sharp and D, and then you're moving up and grabbing this G and E note. Come down, and I'm hearing it like this. There's actually, you know, multiple guitars kind of sneaking in there. I'm not really honestly sure what's going on. I just turned it into that kind of country lick. You know, really cool riff, and it's moving, you know, and you really got to kind of stay on top of it because you're hybrid picking and moving around, but cool riff. last but not least is I Know a Little from the Street Survivors album, and I've always loved this tune. The guitar work is brilliant. And there's actually 2 guitars for this opening, but I always like the challenge of trying to play both those guitar parts at the same time, which it's hard, but I Know a Little, something like this. One more time. So it's really weird, and it's crammed in there. And of course I'm playing 2 guitar parts at the same time, so if I just stuck with one guitar, it would be way easier, but you would be missing those chord hits, which I think is, essential for the song. So you hear this really classic, we're in A7 in the opening right there. So you're hammering on that, C to C sharp, and then E to F sharp to A. And then right there, a B flat 9 to A9. I mean, it's implied chords with those little 3-note clusters. And then do that opening line again. And then right there, it's an implied E flat 9 to D9. And then you're going to change that little speed lick. And then back to that B flat to A9, or B flat 9 to A9. Back to that first riff. Then right here, it's an implied F9 to E9. And then it's E flat to D9 implied. And then you hear this crazy lick. And really the only way I could find to play that, I don't know if it's hybrid picked, is this Steve Gaines playing that lick? Because it's crazy. But the only way I found to actually make that work, because you could hybrid pick it, I guess, but I'm sweeping that lick. I'm actually just doing 2 upstroke sweeps right there. Which is very bizarro. And you actually, after you do that, you just grab this D to C, and you're kind of moving back into A minor pentatonic. Really weird. And once again, it's just crammed in there. So all the way through this one more time. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Lynyrd Skynyrd. And as soon as I put together the recent Allman Brothers Chordplay, I noticed a lot of Skynyrd requests, started pouring in. And I've had requests for Lynyrd Skynyrd, ever since I started this channel. But I'm just finally now getting around to, hitting these guys. It's great music. I'm definitely a big blues and rock fan. And that little smudge of country in the mix is actually kind of cool, because you hear twangy, licks and just some really different sounds, in their music, which I like that. Some of the slide stuff and just these different approaches, and that swampy kind of rock sound. I love it. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.